The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Tony out on a Thursday. That usually happens. What doesn't usually happen is I talk to two guests on a Thursday. But we got two today, both of them book authors. Joe Posnanski, who wrote Why We Love Baseball. He'll be with us in about 20 minutes. And in the 10 o'clock hour, Mike Richman, whose latest book is George Allen, A Football Life, is out. He's written several books about the Redskins. You can still say that. The title of the books have Redskins in them. And he has obviously done extensive research on Allen because the book is 624 pages. So I admittedly have not read all of the book. I have skimmed through some of what was sent to me, and I do know quite a bit about George Allen, so I will have plenty to talk about with Mike Richman coming up at 10:20. But let's begin with this. And when it wasn't reported, because this is not really what Mike Florio does. Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk, he likes to kind of push a rumor along. Just kind of, I'm not reporting this. I'm just saying this is what people are saying. George Michael used to do this too. People are saying. He's not saying I've checked sources. I believe this is going to happen. He doesn't really stick his neck out there like that. He just sort of says, it's in the wind. And he said it was in the wind that Bill Belichick could possibly become the next coach of the Commanders. He didn't have any real strong evidence of that, just, again, what people have been saying around the league. And then the other day, Dan Orlovsky, who's with ESPN, former quarterback in the NFL, very good analyst, and not really one who spreads around a lot of rumors. That's really not his job. His job is to analyze what he sees on tape. He watches a lot of tape of games and is really, I think, educated on the game of football and the strategy and things like that. But he doesn't really push along rumors. Well, he was on the Pat McAfee show. I guess this was on Tuesday. And if you missed this yesterday, this is what Orlovsky said to McAfee about the Belichick rumors.
Now, Diana Rossini reported this weekend that people around the building are assuming or preparing for a mutual parting of ways between Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. He will go coach somewhere else if that is the case. Will he be the GM as well? We assume, but who knows? Mm-hmm. That would be bananas. Yeah. That would be a colossal move in the NFL news cycle.
I've heard that. I've heard more and more of that over the past week. I'm not a reporter, all that stuff, but I have heard that.
You're a journalist.
I have heard that that's going to be the case, and it's kind of who knows the likelihood of it, but I've heard that that's going to happen, and I've heard the location is already kind of determined as well.
Where he's going?
LA Chargers.
I'm not giving. I've heard that.
Who'd you hear from?
I've heard that.
He kind of slipped in Chargers in there. And Gary Myers, who is a reporter, longtime New York Daily News NFL reporter, reporting for Inside the NFL, he knows the league and he knows Bill Belichick. And he has said that he has heard from a source that it is going to be the Chargers. However, Albert Breer on yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show, Breer, who writes for SI.com, was asked about the Orlovsky comments in this way.
What the hell is Orlovsky saying?
I mean, I don't know if a destination has been determined. I would say this, though, the Washington stuff has been out there for a while. And, it's something that's been talked about in NFL circles for more than the time that it's been out there in the public. And, that one's interesting to me, just because, if you look at the history of things, Dan, we've seen owners bring in older coaches with a track record. It's generally a credibility play. Shad Khan needed credibility in Jacksonville, so he brought in Tom Coughlin. At the beginning of Steve Ross's ownership, in Miami, they had Bill Parcells there as the football czar. So it would make sense if you're trying to restore credibility to your organization and you're Josh Harris. And Josh Harris, by the way, would be able to negotiate this with the Patriots because he went to Harvard Business School with Jonathan Kraft, and they've had a relationship going back over 30 years. So there are some dot connecting you can do there that would make that one make a lot of sense. I do think Bill still wants to coach. Now that's just my opinion, based on, what I've heard from people who know him really, really well and who've been around him. That Shula record is sitting out there. He's 16 wins away. I think at one point we thought it was likely that he would get there in 2024. That looks a lot less likely now. So if you're the Patriots and you're talking about hanging on to him and he's pursuing that Shula record, you'd be talking about another 2 years maybe now. So there's a lot of things there, like where you can say it would make some sense. The two teams you hear most connected to Bill have been, at least, from my perspective, been Washington and Dallas, and both in the NFC East, both historic franchises, both with owners that badly want to win. Obviously in different spots in their ownership, but it should be interesting going forward. And look, I mean, if you want to go way back in history, and I know I'm being long-winded here, but this is a complex topic. Like the last two times the Patriots changed coaches, there was a trade involved. They went from, dealing Bill Parcells to the Jets, then they hired Pete Carroll. And then when they brought Belichick in, there was a trade with the Jets that happened there too. And in both cases, both Parcells and Belichick had things lined up before the season ended. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's some back channel communication that happens, towards the end of the year.
Now, this is where it gets more interesting for me, because Albert Breer is actually a reporter. He's one who checks sources. He's not like Florio. And he's saying a couple of things that make sense here. One, the credibility that you get as a new owner with Shad Khan bringing in Tom Coughlin, who had actually been a coach in the NFL before and had worked with Bill Parcells. And then Parcells himself, who goes to Miami when they get new ownership there. That makes some sense. The connection between Jonathan Kraft and Josh Harris might be something to it there. And then also the Patriots, when they change coaches, they make trades. I wouldn't want to give up anything. But after hearing that, Rex Minturn is with us today. Are you in any way swayed towards the idea now of Belichick coming here?
No. How does hiring Bill Belichick give you credibility if you're Josh Harris?
Well,
among the other owners?
Well, that, and also that he's won 6 Super Bowls, and, they can sell it in this way. It kind of ran its course in New England. And how many coaches stay 20 years on the job? And, things just sort of ended there, and they had kept things together for a long time with Tom Brady trying to keep them competitive, and then the bottom finally fell out. I don't want to see him here, but after hearing what Breer said, I'm a little bit more convinced it could happen. I would rule out Dallas. I don't think Dallas happens. Now you say, well, didn't Jerry Jones hire Bill Parcells? Yes, he did. He hired Bill Parcells when his attention was focused on building the stadium, building Jerry World. He wanted somebody to take over. Jerry Jones doesn't want somebody else to get the credit for winning a Super Bowl, which is what Belichick would do if you were able to pull it off.
To me, hiring Belichick would be the ultimate Snyder move.
Yeah, it would smack of Snyder, wouldn't it?
So I don't think Harris would do any. I would hope that he would want to do anything opposite.
But, again, the discussions that he may or may not have had, either over dinner or over the phone with his old buddy from Harvard, Jonathan Kraft, you never know.
The Krafts don't get along with Belichick.
Exactly. So here's Jonathan Kraft saying, we'd like to trade him to you. Would you be interested in doing that? And they got him under contract. I don't know how many more years.
Would you try to screw over your friend like that? I don't know.
Screw over who?
Would Kraft do that to Josh Harris if they're friends?
Business, just business, Solly. Come on, that's the way things work. That's the way things work in the world. And I don't think he would see it as screwing him over. He would say,
I think you'd give him an honest opinion that Belichick is not easy to work with.
Oh, I think Josh Harris knows that. I don't think he would go into this blind. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but after what Breer said there, it takes me further along than I was a couple of days ago. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, he is plugged in.
Yeah, he is. All right, let's get to the defense, which stinks, and that's a big reason that the Commanders are 4-6 now. A couple of the excellent beat reporters for the team have weighed in on this. Michael Phillips used to be with the Richmond Times-Dispatch. I don't know why they got rid of him, but that's part of the newspaper business. He's now writing for the Washington Times, and he's talking about the explosive plays, which is been a big problem. Jack Del Rio, who's due to talk again today, said that last week. That's what's kept them from being an elite defense, is that they give up too many big explosive plays and got to cut them down. Here are the numbers that Phillips has. Opposing teams have had 44 plays of 20 or more yards against Washington this year. That's when an explosive play is defined as. That's the third worst number in the league, behind only the Steelers and Bengals. Steelers have made up for it with takeaways and giving their offense the ball back, while the Bengals are somewhat surprisingly on the outside of the playoff picture right now. But that could change dramatically if they win at Baltimore tonight. More, he says, Washington's defense was about the league average in big plays in 2021 and 2022 and near the front of the line in the 2020 playoff season. Why the regression this year? A lot of reasons for that. And this is one of them that was brought up by Kendall Fuller in the locker room yesterday.
For instance, the one that we gave up in the game was just everybody hunting to the ball. Everybody having their leverage and keeping their leverage. But I think the biggest thing is on us as players, we got to take it amongst ourselves better and be more urgent when plays get dropped down like that, and come up and just and make a tackle and get on to the next play.
Yeah, back-to-back weeks, they gave up 64-yard explosive plays for touchdowns. Didn't cost them the game against New England, but played a big factor in their loss to Seattle last week. And against the Giants, they gave up 7 explosive plays, and the Giants only scored 14 points. More from this from Nikki Jabala in the Post today, and talking about the 2 tackles who are highly paid, Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, and what they have done. And it's not just since they traded Montez Sweat and Chase Young. This goes back further than that. Jonathan Allen had a quarterback pressure rate of 11.9% in the first 5 games, but over the past 5 games, and 4 of them would have been with Sweat and Young, that fell to 7.6%. In that span, he had only 5 quarterback hits and 1 sack. Payne has not laid a hit on a quarterback since week 5 and has not recorded a sack since week 2. His pressure rate the last 2 games against New England and Seattle, 2.6%. And then she talks about the time that the quarterbacks had to throw. New England was prepared to get the ball out quickly. Mac Jones threw on an average of 2.3 seconds, but Geno Smith had over 3 seconds to throw. That may not seem like much, but in an NFL game, it is. And then she says, think back to 2022 when Young was sidelined with a knee injury for the first 14 games. Payne and Allen combined for 16 sacks during that stretch, ranking 2nd and 4th among defensive tackles. They also collected 6 batted passes, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. So the 2 highly paid to be defensive ends are gone, and the highly paid tackles ain't doing bupkis right now. That's a problem. Back to the offense and how pass-happy they are. Ron Rivera speaking yesterday, and listen carefully to this because I think it addresses what their strategy was going into the season. You know, you wonder, and I've said this over and over, why don't they give the running backs the ball? Only 12 carries by running backs last week against Seattle. They're pass-happy. They don't seem to be running away from that, and this is Rivera maybe with the roots of that pass offense.
Talking with EB back in February, it was about distributing the ball and getting the ball to the players in space, giving them an opportunity to be explosive and dynamic. And that was one of the things, again, that, I told you guys earlier, probably last February, that I was really thoughtful about and seeing, and listening and looking for ways to get the ball to these guys as quickly as possible.
So that's what he's doing, distributing the ball, and they are spreading the ball around. It's not uncommon to see 7 or 8 receivers catch passes, including running backs out of the backfield. But I would like to see him run more. This is more from Sam Howell yesterday, quarterbacks talk on Wednesday, and Howell talking about the growing relationship with Eric Bieniemy, which is making it feel more and more like whether Bieniemy is the head coach or not next year, he's likely to still be here on the coaching staff. This was Howell yesterday with reporters.
How has your relationship with Eric kind of grown over these 3-4 months since the season started? Are you more direct with him? Is he more direct with you? How have things evolved?
Yeah, obviously it's definitely grown as we've gone through each and every week, and we've obviously learned more about each other as we've gone throughout this journey. I just think there's nothing like going through games together and getting that experience. So our relationship's definitely closer. I don't think anything's changed as far as what he feels like. If he feels like he can, talk to me a different way than he did when we first met, So it's pretty much stayed the same. But I would just say we've we've just grown to know each other better. We've grown to get more comfortable with each other. And I would say there's probably more dialogue as far as, what I like, what I don't like. But it definitely has grown.
And then, obviously, the last 3 weeks offensively have been going very well. Have there been specific things that you've done better or that have gone the right way that maybe the month prior weren't?
It's hard to say. I think every game is different. I think we're doing some good things. I think we're still leaving a lot of points out there. I don't really try to compare week to week, game to game. It's kind of hard to do that. Every team is different. Every defense is different. We just got to try to take it 1 week at a time. And, just because we've played well, I think we've played all right the past few weeks, doesn't mean we're going to play all right this week, And so we got to take it 1 week at a time, 1 day at a time, and make sure we approach it the right way to give ourselves a chance to try to play well on Sunday and give us a chance to win.
But it is trending in the right direction. He's leading the league in passing yardage, which nobody would have expected going into the season. And he's getting the ball to the running backs. I mean, two of the huge plays in that game last week against Seattle were what they call off-schedule plays to Brian Robinson. And Robinson came into the league with this reputation as a bulldozer. This is part of a big story that Sam Fortier has in the Post today. A bulldozer, a road grader, an agile tank. He was a guy you gave the ball to in short yardage, and they thought they had it all set with Antonio Gibson, a former college wide receiver who would be catching passes on third down out of the backfield. Well, what they overlooked is how good of a pass catcher Brian Robinson is, and as a redshirt senior at Alabama in 2021, he caught 35 passes for 296 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's pretty damn good for a running back, especially at Alabama, where they do run the ball quite a bit. And so that is something that maybe dropped him down to where he went in the draft when he go in the 4th round, and that if you did that again, he'd obviously be a first-round pick for the way he's played. Robinson was talking about being a receiver yesterday. He said he doesn't care how he gets the ball, whether he gets it as a runner or as a pass catcher, and kind of stuck his chest out and said, yeah, damn right I can catch.
I've done everything, the coaches asked me to do, no matter what it is, things people think I can't do. Obviously they're going to say I can't catch the ball, but I'm going to continue to show that I'm a football player. I can do anything that a running back is supposed to do in the backfield, and I'm going to continue to show that.
Was that something you think that teams overlooked when you came into the draft? You were a pass catching ability?
I mean, probably so, but how could you overlook it when I caught for like 300, 400 yards in one season? So you evaluate what you want to evaluate. So I'm gonna continue to show that I can catch the ball, and I can catch the ball very well.
Yeah, here are the numbers through 10 games: 20 catches, 256 yards, 3 touchdowns, 12.8 yards per catch. Pretty good. Next hour, we're going to get to more on the book circuit with Mike Richman. His new book is George Allen, A Football Life. We'll talk to him at 10:20. And also, Tony and Mike weighing in on the Deshaun Watson story. And guess whose head popped out of the ground for quarterback availability? Oh, yes. We'll hear from him as well. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Well, we actually start every day at 9, but we roll through the 10 o'clock hour, and like today, we roll through the 11 o'clock hour sometimes with Tony off. And coming up in about 20 minutes, Mike Richman, his new book is George Allen, A Football Life. We'll talk to him about all the research that he has done on George Allen, who's one of the real characters in the history of the NFL. I mean, there's so many little stories about him that are just, when you look back now, he's been gone for over 30 years, and he left Washington after the 1977 season. The Super Bowl year was 51 years ago. Wow. Coming up on 51 years since that. But some of us remember the really good times that he brought to Washington, and we'll talk about that with Mike Richman. Meantime, the beat goes on in Ashburn. And Ron Rivera was asked Monday at his news conference about what specifically he had seen with the improvement of Sam Howell. And he didn't narrow it down to anything. But yesterday in his follow-up news conference, the coach talks Monday, Wednesday, and Friday during the week, and then Sundays after the game. He had some specifics on what he's seen in improvement of Sam Howell, especially last 2 weeks.
His recognition of what's happening, he's his pre-snap read, and then his post-snap read. They're one of those things where you get out, you see something, and you can make those adjustments at the line. But when you take the snap and then having to react to what you see, that's been really good. And you see him seeing the pressures better. You see him see the rotation, the coverage is better, and which allows him to go through his progression quicker or get to where he needs to so he can release the ball in a timely fashion. You see him feel the pressure and drift in the pocket sometimes. There's a couple instances, if you go back and look at the New England game, there was one play in particular where he drifts back just enough to give himself time to throw that one to Jahan. So those are the little detailed things of what he has to do that you really see the growth and improvement on.
Now, Rivera was on. He does a Monday shot with Chick Hernandez of Channel 9, and Chick said, are we ready to say that he's the dude? And Rivera said, well, he has a chance to be. So he pulled up just a little bit. But you're hearing more and more from the players about Howell and how they are fully into him. And look, Terry McLaurin, poor guy, been here since 2019. It's been one quarterback after another. And to have had the consistency of having the same guy for 11 straight games, that's almost like a Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers situation in Green Bay as far as McLaurin is concerned. And he has noticed, especially in the last 2 weeks, what he has seen in improvement from Howell.
I think he's really seeing the football field really well right now. I think he's making really quick decisions. One thing that's really stood out is his ability to extend plays. I think that's really stood out from the beginning of the season to now. He's keeping his eyes down the field, and it's allowing us to find holes in the defense and be able to make plays off schedule, which is extremely big for us. And I think he's doing a great job also just taking what the defense gives him. But also being aggressive and really fitting the ball into some tight windows. So I think seems like he's making improvements each and every week, and some of the things that may have tripped him up early in the season aren't necessarily tripping him up now.
No, that's good. So this is all in comment. It sounded like it to me. This is McLaurin with more on Howell, and this is the closest to, we got our guy. Or as Dan Snyder said last year about Carson Wentz, we got ourselves a quarterback. Here's Terry McLaurin.
I definitely think he's showing each and every week that he has what it takes to be successful in this league, to be a guy that you can depend on, that you can count on. He's going to be someone who's accountable. He's going to improve on his mistakes each and every week, and he's going to give his guys a chance to make plays down the field. And it's not just going to be one guy, but all of us have to be ready on each and every play because he sees the field so well that he has the ability to make all those throws. So I think it really allows us to spread teams out and force them to cover each and every person we have out there.
Okay. So, again, it's going to be more about development, but 7 games to go. Yeah, they're not out of the playoffs yet, but realistically they are. And, we'll see what we see in the last 2 weeks. Does that continue at that pace? And, maybe by the end of the season, are they ready to say this is the quarterback? I would still draft one, and I would still have somebody there under a rookie contract because you never know. And look, this is what the Packers did for many years, that they had quarterbacks who would play under Brett Favre, and they would develop them, and then they would trade them. And, that's I think, the best way to go. Plus, there's no guarantee that Sam Howell stays healthy. It's a 17-game season now. It's going to be an 18-game season, maybe not next year, but probably the year after that. And you really got to have 2 quarterbacks now, as we have seen with the Cleveland Browns. And we'll get to them in just a moment. Here's some more from yesterday on the Howell situation. Bram Weinstein there asking this question to Howell when he had his media appearance.
Sam, you have more passing yards than anyone else in the NFL. You have other metrics that are among the league leaders in the NFL. What does all that mean to you here in your first full season as a starter?
Honestly, I don't really look at it a whole lot. It doesn't really mean much to me. Obviously, I want to go out there every single week and play well and give our team a chance to win. And obviously, we haven't won enough games. We haven't won the games that I feel like we should have won this season. So that's a little bit disappointing. But I really don't look too much into what I'm doing on a personal level. I look more into what we're doing as a team and just how I can improve for this football team and how I can put this football team in better chances to win football game.
And one thing, and this is, all the Taylor Heineke people, Heineke doesn't have the arm. Howell has the arm, and he knows it.
I've always been confident in my arm, and I've always felt like I can make every single throw on the football field. So I think in that situation, I have all the confidence in the world that I can get the ball where I want to get the ball. So I think it's just more. I'm probably just a more confident player, but the confidence in my arm has never changed.
Yeah, he's made some really good throws this year. Made a really excellent touchdown throw last week. All right, to the Deshaun Watson situation, and this broke yesterday morning, about the time we were going on the air, a little bit before we were going on the air, that Deshaun Watson is going to be out for the year, needs shoulder surgery, broken bone in his shoulders. He also got an ankle problem, but the shoulder is going to keep him out for the rest of the season. And Tony and Mike kicked this around yesterday on PTI.
Watson suffered a bone fracture in his throwing shoulder in the first half of the Browns' big win over the Ravens Sunday. Watson went 14 for 14 in the second half. Says he wanted to keep pushing through the pain, but doctors say he will risk significant further injury without surgery now. Tone, where does this leave the Brownies?
Honestly, I think where it leaves the Browns is what I would call the karma payback box. I've never understood how the Cleveland owners could give Deshaun Watson that kind of guaranteed contract, where was all of those accusations of sexual misconduct by all of those massage therapists. But let me give Watson credit for football, what he did the other day, because he had the greatest half that he's had since he went to Cleveland, and he did it on the road against a good team, Baltimore. 14 of 14 in the second half, 7 of 7 in the fourth quarter, leads them on the drive that ends up with them winning on the field goal. They are 5-1 this year when he starts, and Mike, honestly, I think Cleveland's the biggest surprise in the league. I think that's over Pittsburgh and over Houston. I think Cleveland has been that good. But here's where it leaves them right now. Here's their next quarterback, all right? He's Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He's a rookie out of UCLA. And behind him is P.J. Walker, who is a veteran of no particular consequence to this point. Together this year so far, Mike, they have 1 touchdown pass and 8 interceptions, and they're completing fewer than 50% of their passes. So if I had any advice with the game coming up against Pittsburgh, it would be bet the under, kids, because they're not going to score. Cleveland's not going to score, and Pittsburgh doesn't score. They score 17 a game. They're 25th in the league.
Well, sort of where it leaves Cleveland is out to me, because you're not going to be any better than your quarterback, and that's how I initially feel. My knee-jerk reaction is that. And then I think about Josh Dobbs in Minnesota, and you would say the same thing if you hadn't just had these fairy tale things that happen with him that he leads every week. Now, is that likely to pop up as well in Cleveland? It's not likely, Tony. And you know, they've paid so much money for that quarterback, guaranteed money, as you point out, $250+ million, or about $250, that there are other positions on the team that they can't even shore up. Now, that defense has been so great that moderate quarterback play from a veteran who understands how to play, and Deshaun Watson does know how to play, plus that defense could equal not just getting to the playoffs, but a run in the playoffs. Now, in that division that I think is the best division in football, I don't know that I can see Cleveland getting to the playoffs without Deshaun Watson.
There is a veteran quarterback out there. I'll get to him in a moment. Tony mentioned the karma here. And Nancy Armour of USA Today has written about Deshaun Watson in the past and has a column about him today. And here's her lead. She says, well, isn't that too bad about Deshaun Watson? And by too bad, I mean a giant dose of much-deserved karma for both Watson and the Cleveland Browns. Before you come after me for reveling in someone else's misfortune, let's remember that Watson is an unrepentant sexual predator, having settled lawsuits with more than 20 women who detailed unwanted touching and or sexual harassment by the quarterback. Yes, she's absolutely right about that. I don't know if you go as far as with injury going karma. Look, there's no defense of Deshaun Watson and what he did and what ultimately led him to Cleveland. But I don't know. It's just the way you're raised. It's the way that, the people say, oh, good, he got hurt. Because that'll happen sometimes during a game. A player who's hated gets hurt and the fans all applaud that he's hurt. That has happened. In fact, it happened. It happened in a game. What was it? The player who came to Washington from Philadelphia with the Nationals. It was the guy with the hair, the long hair.
Jason Worth?
Yeah, he got hurt in a game at Philly, and the fans cheered. I remember that. So there is some of that, and that's not a good thing. Anyway, this was General Manager Andrew Berry yesterday. We're devastated. We're disappointed for Deshaun. And Nancy Armour writes, actually, some of us have been waiting 2+ years for the universe to exact its payback on Watson and the Browns. Again, celebrating injury. I have a little trouble with that. More from Armour. According to complaints against him, Watson exposed himself during massages and touched therapists with his genitals. He threatened at least one of the women, suggesting he could ruin her career if she told anyone. Yes, indefensible. Absolutely indefensible. And then she makes this comparison. She says, Watson is not the first athlete to do wrong. Michael Vick spent 21 months in federal prison for his involvement in a dogfighting ring. Ray Rice lost his career after punching his then-fiancée out in an elevator. The difference is Vick and Rice recognized what they had done was wrong. Well, I think both of them initially denied it, and then Ray Rice held a news conference with the front office of the Ravens and didn't really apologize for it. And it wasn't until a second video came up of what happened in the elevator, because all they had initially was him dragging his then-fiancée off the elevator. They had the punch from the elevator, and that's when the league finally did something about it. I think they ignored it because there was video out. TMZ was the one that got it, and the league could have gotten their hands on it, but they didn't. So I would say, let's also recognize that both Vick and Rice initially denied what happened there, and it was only after investigation that it was found out, which furthered their punishment. They did apologize, and they've spent the time since trying to make up for it. Watson has learned nothing. He has tried to make amends because he hasn't tried to make amends because he doesn't see a need to. These women were disposable to him. The only value was to give him pleasure and sexual gratification, and he did not care that he did not have their consent and was doing them harm. Karma, as the old saying goes, remains undefeated. There's another way to put that as well. Watson earned every bit that he got. I don't think I would go as far as she did, but the Cleveland Browns, I would say karma for them, in that they couldn't wait to give this guy $230 million guaranteed, and they wanted to brush all this other stuff under the carpet. So there's that. And then this. Robert Griffin III, and I actually mentioned his name when I found out about this yesterday. It's been a while since he's been in Cleveland. He played there in 2016, but he's always saying, "I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go." So yesterday he was on the Rich Eisen show as an analyst, not to talk necessarily about himself, but before he left, Eisen hit him with this.
Has your phone rang from the Cleveland Browns today, Robert?
It has not rang from the Cleveland Browns.
All right.
I've seen some beat reporters. Aditi even tagged me in a tweet asking how I'm doing, and my answer is I'm doing great. I feel amazing. ESPN's done a great job giving me opportunities, and I'm having a lot of fun doing what I'm doing right now. But I have had calls throughout the season. But I have not been called by the Cleveland Browns yet.
Okay. So, but none of the calls throughout the season have caused you to just, pitch your outstanding career that you're building right now.
Well, Rich, you know this. This is an opportunity that I can do for the next 30, 40 years of my life since I'm 33. And football will be there for me probably at least for the next 5, 6, 7 years. So it's got to be the right opportunity. I'm not going to jump at any opportunity. It's got to be the right one. And I'll just weigh those opportunities as they come in.
Oh, please. 33 years old, 5, 6, 7 years? The phone may be ringing. I don't think it's ringing with offers. It may be ringing with, and this is common in the NFL, that on Tuesday, teams have cattle calls when they have injuries. Usually it's for a kicker. Sometimes it's for a linebacker or a cornerback. But generally speaking, those guys, just come in, they get a look, and they're gone. They don't always sign a player. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they sign a kicker. Sometimes they pick somebody up. That may have been what he's been offered. Nobody's offering him to come in and play because, well, he can play. He can't play for long because he always gets hurt. And he has said, I'm a big distraction. Nobody wants. No, he's not a distraction anymore. It's more like, there's RG3. And to think that he's saying when he's 38, 39 years old, that he's still going to be getting calls to play? No, it's not going to happen. It's over. and he needs to move on with his life, and he needs to say, football is over for me. He can blame it on an injury if he wants. I think there's a lot more to it than just him tearing up his knee. It's his attitude. It's the way that he continues to be unable to protect himself once he's out on the field. He still hasn't learned how to slide. And these teams that are calling, really, I mean, because he's begging all the time to get a shot. And he's telling, no, just wasn't the right opportunity. It wasn't right thing. Why? Because they didn't really want you. There may have been calls just to come out and look. But, you know, he also, Rich Eisen does this charity run, this 40-yard dash, which he does at the Combine, and then he holds a separate event. It's a great cause. He raises a lot of money, and RG3 ran something like a 4.4 there. And so when he was on with Eisen, I said, well, are teams calling? Oh, yeah, I'm getting lots of calls. It was before the season. No, you're not. Sorry, it's over. You're not going to get any more calls. Mike Richman will join me next. His book is George Allen, A Football Life. We'll talk about we'll get into some of the stories, but George Allen, I think, was OCD. I really do. And we'll talk to Mike about that when we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Breaking news, if you're just getting in your car, the Major League owners have approved the A's move to Las Vegas, but it's not supposed to happen until 2025 or maybe even later than that, depending on how they can work things out. But it's only the second team to move. The last one was the Washington Senators. Now, you could say the Expos moved, but they were owned by Major League Baseball. That didn't have to be approved by the other owners. This case, the owners had to approve this, and the A's are moving to Las Vegas. And speaking of 1971, when the Senators left, 1971 also brought George Allen to town as coach of the Washington Redskins. And Mike Richman is with us. His new book is George Allen, A Football Life. He's written extensively about the Redskins, written several books about their history. And I'll start by this. How old are you? What's your age?
Andy, I'm 62 years old.
Okay, so I need to put this into context because I'm 65, meaning that I was 13 years old when George Allen came to town. You're just a little younger than me, but do you remember his arrival here?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I was 10 years old at the time. And, I remember a few things here and there from the 60s, but it was really everything crystallized when he came here in 71. That's when I became a Redskins fanatic. I mean, I would live vicariously through that team, not only Allen, but, the players, Billy and Sonny and McDowell, Over the Hill Gang, whatever. I mean, all that whole group. I mean, that was my team, yes.
Yeah, well, see, the history, and I started watching them in the mid-'60s, where they were recovering, and I use that word, it's accurate, recovering from being an all-white team. And in 1961, they finished with just one win. They had a tie, but they finished with only one win. And over the years, when the color line was broken and great players like Bobby Mitchell and Charlie Taylor joined the team, they became respectable with Sonny. They had a winning season under Vince Lombardi. He died. Bill Austin was the interim coach in 1970. They finished 6-8. George Allen comes to town, right, Mike? And he says, the future is now. And I think there was great skepticism about that. Like, oh, yeah, he's going to make us a winner right away. I mean, I don't think people fully embraced that, did they?
That's correct, right? It was not fully embraced. I mean, the reporters were asking him or telling him, hey, George, you're mortgaging the future by trading away all these draft picks. And down the road, actually, that would become true to an extent. But, initially the 71, 72 seasons, the 72 season in particular, I mean, that was his best year in Washington. And that team consisted of a lot of those players that he had obtained when he initially came to Washington. I mean, that great defense that he had, what he had to do, he had to fortify the defense. He had those great offensive players from the 60s, Charlie Taylor and Jerry Smith and Larry Brown, but he really had to strengthen that defense, which is what he focused on, bringing all those Ramskins from L.A. and McDowell and Berlin Biggs. So he really made that defense into one of the best in the league. I mean, it became a true contender in the NFL at that time.
Yeah. Now, you're right. It's a good offensive team before, like, Sonny Jurgensen could put up 5 touchdowns and the Redskins would lose. And so he looked at this defense, and there were a few players on there he wanted to keep, like Chris Hamburger and Pat Fisher. But, yeah, he did have to reload with it. And, one of the things about the NFL in those days, there was no free agency. So he couldn't just take a guy whose contract was up and bring him in. But he also had no salary cap. And other owners were reluctant to pay these veterans this kind of money. So when he was offering up draft picks, which you didn't have to pay very much for experienced veterans, that was attractive. And I think he was able to have an advantage, don't you think, Mike, on other teams with no salary cap to get these players?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he had full authority to do whatever he wanted with that team.
Right.
He was the GM as well as the coach. So yeah, he paid these veteran players a lot of money to come. And actually, that's what led to, a lot of the irritation between him and Edward Bennett Williams. I mean, those enormous salaries and, of course, Redskins Park being so expensive for its day. I mean, Allen built that. I mean, that's what led Williams to say, I gave him an unlimited budget and he exceeded it. I mean, that famous remark. But, yeah, I mean, he paid those guys a lot of money and he resuscitated these careers. I mean, Billy Kilmer was really he was sort of at the tail end of his career in New Orleans. And Allen resuscitated his career, bringing him to D.C. And actually, when you look back on it, that was probably the best move by George Allen in terms of an acquisition. And you could put Kenny Houston up there too, and those other series of those other players. But bringing Kilmer, with Jurgensen getting hurt in the '71 preseason, having Kilmer here, I mean, that really just kept them moving along in terms of their winning status.
Yeah. Now, Kilmer, the Saints traded him because they had drafted Archie Manning, and they knew that they were going to go with him as the starter. And as we saw Manning's career unfold in New Orleans, he had nobody blocking for him. So Kilmer, if he stayed there, his career was going to end quickly. He came here, and he had a really good running back in Larry Brown. But I think the big point about Kilmer coming in was, okay, well, there's somebody that can play if Sonny gets hurt, but Sonny didn't get hurt, right? I mean, he'd been here since 1964. How many games had he missed going into the 71 season? 2, 3, 4?
Not many.
Yeah.
He had been nicked here and there, but I don't think there were any major injuries that, he definitely did not miss a half or a full season or anything like that. I mean, but then getting injured in the 71 preseason, I mean, Kilmer was right there. And but I do want to point out that initially, right, as you just alluded to, initially when Kilmer was acquired, I mean, he was acquired as a backup to Sonny.
Yeah.
I mean, George Allen was very excited to have Sonny Jurgensen as a starting quarterback. I mean, who would not be excited to have Sonny, one of the greatest passers in NFL history, and all those tremendous numbers he had put up in the 60s. But, yeah, when he went down in the 71 preseason, Kilmer was there, and they won their first 5 games in 1971. And as you mentioned earlier, the Senators had just moved out around the time of the first regular season game that year. So the whole town was Redskins. I mean, there was no other pro sports team in D.C. at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really good, perfect storm there where the baseball team had left. The basketball team didn't come till 73. The hockey team wasn't formed until 74. So you had that sweet spot. And as you mentioned, they start out 5-0. And George Allen was on the cover of Newsweek with his slogan, "The future is now." And people here who hadn't seen a winning team since World War II were just over the moon. And I think when they came back from the road trip where they went to 5-0, or maybe it was when they lost the first game, didn't they have like thousands of people at Dulles Airport to greet them?
Well, actually, after the third game of the season, the 20-16 win over the Cowboys in Dallas, when they returned to Dulles Airport, there were 10,000 fans that had stormed the airport. Not all of them made it onto the tarmac, but many did, and that would be unthinkable today. But, yeah, they went onto the tarmac, and actually I learned that the plane had to be diverted from where it was originally intended to park at Dulles because the pilot had been notified that all those fans were there. But, yeah, I mean, there's a photo in my book showing fans wanting autographs and photos with George Allen. But, yeah, he was talk of town, just like you said, Newsweek magazine. There was another publication had the headline was "Ice Cream Man Cometh." As you know, his nickname was Ice Cream, or one of his nicknames.
Right.
But yeah, he was the He was the talk of D.C. at the time, and and Republicans and Democrats were agreeing on something for once.
Yeah,
at that time.
although he was definitely a Republican and a Nixon guy, and there's more to that story ahead. But let me get back up here with Mike Richman. His book is George Allen: A Football Life, 624 pages. So there's extensive research in here, and how he got to where he got to, I think, is an unusual path. He was not a big time football player, was he?
Well, in his youth, I mean, he was a really good athlete. I mean, he was a 3-sport athlete in high school, Lakeshore High School in the Detroit area, and he played intramural sports in college. I think he was pretty good. He was a good basketball player, but he knew he didn't have the athletic ability to go any farther than that. But as early as his youth, and this was part of the daring of George Allen, and just thinking that nothing is unachievable. He wanted to be involved in pro sports in some capacity. I mean, he saw there was a dream that he had at that time in his youth, and growing up during the Great Depression. I mean, not many people thought of that. I mean, they thought of more practical ways of making money, but he wanted to be involved in sports. And sure enough, by the time he got to his last college stop was at University of Michigan, where he earned his bachelor's and master's. And he got his way in made his way in with Fritz Kreisler, who was the great Michigan coach at the time. And Kreisler offered him an assistant job with the 150-pound midget team, which was just starting up then in 1947. And that was George Allen's first coaching gig of any kind.
And that leads him, so he's at Michigan as an assistant, and that's what, in the 1940s, 50s?
That was 1947.
47. So let's leap ahead. How does he get from there to become defensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears?
So from Michigan, he immediately got a job as head coach at Morningside in Iowa, Morningside College. He stayed there for several years. Then he coached at Whittier in the Los Angeles area for 6 years, which would today be considered, I guess, like a Division III level. I mean, it was, and that's actually where he met Nixon. Anyway, after Whittier, and I wrote about this in the book, and this is the only conclusion that I could come to. He was let go, or he was forced out by Whittier after the 1956 season. But he also knew Sid Gilman. He had come to know Sid Gilman by getting into L.A. Rams. Gilman was the head coach of the Rams at the time. He was able to get into training camps of the L.A. Rams. That was George Allen. He made his way in, knew Gilman. Gilman hired him as an assistant on the Rams staff in 1957. He was the offensive ends assistant, which was a very interesting choice because he was a defensive-oriented coach. But then he was let go after the 57 season by the Rams. He was without a coaching job for a while. But again, he was selling weighted footballs, and he made his way into the Bears training camp, and Hallis knew him, and Hallis eventually offered him a job as a spy because the Bears had 2 late season games against the Rams that season, 58. So he brought Allen as a spy, tell the Bears everything he knew about the Rams.
Right.
And then early in 1959, the Bears hired him as the head talent scout. He wasn't named the head defensive coach until the beginning of the 63 offseason. He replaced Clark Shaughnessy late in 62, and then he became the head defensive coordinator in 63. And that's when he formed that ferocious Bears defense that won the NFL championship for that team in 1963. Allen was the architect of that Bears championship team.
And he was still there for the rookie year of Dick Butkus in 1965, which was the only good season that Butkus had. They never made the playoffs when he was there, but they finished 9-5, I believe, and Butkus stayed. Allen went to the Rams. He didn't get fired for losing there. The owner didn't like him because he thought he was nuts, and he winds up in Washington. And I don't know whether you included this in the book or not. I'll get to reading it at some point, the whole thing. But one of my favorite Allen stories is he winds up in Washington. Butkus, after the 73 season, is finished because of a bad knee. The Bears release him. Allen says, come to Washington. I want to have Stan Levine, the team doctor, look at it. Butkus says, well, I'll come, but it's basically bone on bone. Allen says, come anyway. Levine looks at it and says, I don't know how he's walking, much less playing football. That's not going to happen. And Allen is so focused on having Dick Butkus. He says, yeah. All I need him for is the playoffs. And that, to me, addresses, and this I'd like you to talk about what Allen was like with what I think may have been OCD. Right? I mean, when you examine him and you talk to people who knew him and worked with him, he would just focus on things so much that he would kind of lose touch with reality. Is that kind of the way you saw it as you wrote about him?
A little bit, yes, to a sense. I mean, well, in terms of the Butkus situation, I mean, you're right on. He brought him here and actually sent him to the doctor somewhere in the Midwest, I think Oklahoma, and that's where Butkus learned that if he had any opportunity to play again, his knees would have to be fused or something like that. So there was, and that's when he retired. I mean, there was just no way. But that's what Allen envisioned. Allen envisioned that he could bring Butkus back for just a game or two in the regular season, and then he'd be there for a playoff run. But that was George Allen. You know the Bill Belichick story. I'm sure.
Yeah, go ahead and tell it. It's a good story. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, Belichick at the time, he was a commodities broker on Wall Street. He had actually retired from the NFL after the '74 season, and he was a master punt blocker from like '71 through '74, Allen's years. So Allen called Belichick and said, Bill, I just need you to come back for the late season run here. I know you're going to make one big play. And Belichick, yes, coach, I'll be there immediately. And sure enough, in the final regular season game in 1976, Belichick blocked Danny White's punt, the Cowboys punter, later quarterback. Belichick blocked his punt, and the Redskins actually won that last regular season game 27-14 and went to the playoffs in 76. But that was George Allen. He always thought out of the box like that.
Yeah.
And yes, he did have those dreamy scenarios where, that no other coach would really think was possible. But actually, he carried that attitude with him throughout life. I mean, he always thought that he could achieve anything that he set his mind to do.
Yeah.
That's a point that I made in the book.
Yeah, and his focus was on football all the time. There are stories like him going out into a yard and seeing a dandelion, and he would say to somebody else, he says, if I pull this up by its roots, we're going to beat Dallas this year. That's right, yeah. Yeah, those are the kind of things that he did, and eventually I think you'd agree, it wore people out after a while. And he wore it out here. He had winning records. He made the playoffs 5 of the 7 years he was here. I think they had a 500 or winning season the last time. But that was enough. He goes to the Rams. And I was actually talking to our young producer here, Rex, about this a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about short stays in coaching. Explain what happened when his contract was not renewed with the Redskins and how long it lasted when he went to Carroll Rosenbloom's Rams in 1978.
Yeah, sure. So one myth that I want to kind of dispel is he was not fired in the technical sense by the Redskins in 1977 by Williams. Williams offered him a contract extension prior to the 77 season. It was a 4-year extension. Allen never signed it. What he didn't like is the fact that the extension didn't include the stock option clause, which it wasn't in his original contract in 71, but Jack Kent Cooke had written about it, sent a letter to Allen saying that if you want to have the option of buying 5% of the team, the opportunity is there. Allen never exercised that option. Right, that was there. That was actually the same 5% that Lombardi bought in 1969, which he later sold back to the team after his family sold it back after his passing. But yeah, so that opportunity was there for Allen. He never signed the extension. Then when the opportunity came open with the Rams, toward the end of the 77 season, Chuck Knox left to coach the Buffalo Bills. That opening was there. Allen saw it. He and his wife, Etty, wanted to go back to L.A. Their home in Palos Verdes Estates was still there. They thought it was a great opportunity. So that's basically the way that whole story evolved.
Okay.
And then Williams basically said, 3 weeks into January, listen, I've had enough. I've given him unlimited patience, and he has exceeded it.
Yeah.
So that's when he told Allen to walk, But in terms of the technical definition of being fired, I don't think he really was. So heading into Carol Rosenblum, the Rams owner, immediately hired him as the head coach. And actually, that was not met with total enthusiasm by the Rams players, such as Isaiah Robertson, Pat Hayden. They didn't like it at all. Fred Dreyer, Rams defensive end, later the actor, he wanted Don Coryell hired. The St. Louis Cardinals coach, who was even, Air Coryell at the time, and they wanted an explosive offense because they had a great defense. So training camp rolls around. Allen is, his sort of militaristic style, disciplinarian. The players didn't really appreciate that. I mean, he had these long, tedious practices in the hot Southern California sun. He could get away with that in the 60s, but the players were gaining more power. This was like 1978. The television contracts were there. It wasn't the free agency era of today, but still the players were having more of a say. And so they lose their first 2 exhibition games. By the way, Allen had this no water policy, which the players, of course, didn't appreciate, and was dangerous. And even the team doctor told him, "Listen, George, you can't do this." And it was no water policy. He made a trade. He traded Robertson to the Packers, where he didn't have the authority to do that. And Fred Dreyer told me this story. Although one of the Southern California reporters, he denied that ever took place. But apparently there was some contact between Allen and the Green Bay Packers that he wasn't allowed to have. So Rosenblum fired him after 2 exhibition games.
How about
that's
that?
That's how the whole scenario evolved.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about short stays for coaches, and we've seen coaches fired during the season in their first year recently. How about after just 2 exhibition games? And George never coached in the NFL again. He coached in the USFL and he coached in college, but never got back to the NFL. There are just so many stories, 624 pages. And last thing is the foreword, which is written by Dick Vermeil, who a lot of people don't know was the first special teams coach in NFL history hired by George Allen. And I've not read the foreword, but I imagine, Mike, that he has wonderful things to say about Allen.
Well, absolutely. Well, he gave a really nice anecdote, and this actually plays into how detail-oriented Allen was. Yes, Vermeil was hired as the Rams special teams coach in 1969, which is all part of, George Allen being the innovator in special teams. But yeah, he told a story in the forward about how Allen sent him to scout the Baltimore Colts in the '69 preseason because he wanted to see how far John Mackey was lining up off the tackle. Just that little detail right there, because that would dictate the type of play that the Colts were going to call. And Vermeil came back with a report saying, "Hey, Coach, sorry, there's nothing conclusive about it." But that was still Allen in wanting Vermeil to do that. But yeah, special teams, it's a major reason why Allen is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame today. He was an innovator in special teams and on defense too. And of course, of his amazing record, particularly regular season record, his 7-12 winning percentage in regular season games. So. He's third all time in NFL history in that category.
Yeah, he was. If you were here for those 7 years, it was remarkable that nobody brought the town together. Even the Gibbs years, they were great, but Allen made it feel like it was a high school game of the week, and everybody came together in this town. It was really a cool time. The book is George Allen, A Football Life. It's written by Mike Richman. It's in the bookstores now, and it's available. You can get it on Kindle and other outlets besides actual printed paper, right?
Right. It's available through Amazon, through Nebraska Press, their website. Also, author autographed copies are available through my own website, MikeRichmanJournalist.com.
Good. Looking forward to reading it. Thanks for the time, Mike. Good to talk to you.
Thank you very much, Andy. I really appreciate it.
That's Mike Richman. Again, the book, George Allen, A Football Life. And if you are older like me and can remember, I'm sure it'll bring back fond memories. And if you're young, well, take a history lesson because it was really quite a time here in Washington.